sector, those continue to run, but a lot of private sector contracts have come in. So is demand picking up in India? I mean, I would say it's remained pretty much where it is. So what we are seeing today is more or less a share gain.
And also, just to clarify, India means India and Middle East together. So it includes Saudi, Middle East, etc.
Yeah, so we're going to, sorry, Hari from ET, ex-writers. So we just want to kind of drill down into that. I mean, this looks like, I mean, to a layperson in stark contrast with what TCS said, because they said India is down in the dumps. And possibly they're more dependent on government contracts, but we're wondering what you make of that, and what proportion of your revenues come from private customers. Do your revenues largely come from private customers? And if you can also break down the India and Middle East proportions, that will help. Thanks.
So if you look at our, we don't break out the numbers, obviously, between what is government and what is private. But if you look at the private sector and the government mix, with India and Middle East put together, it's more weighted towards private sector than it is towards government for us. And that's probably played to our advantage. The downside of that is when government starts spending, and if we don't participate in that, then we can start losing share. But as of today, it's a positive for us.
Also, while in some form you see a little bit of slowdown on the central government spends, I think the state governments are pretty decently spending money and going ahead with their particular projects, particularly, I mean, certain specified states per se. So there are bids and there are transactions happening.
Sir, global infrastructure services grew 5.6% sequentially. Is that largely led by rebid opportunities? Also, how is Europe looking at such similar opportunities?
I didn't quite get the question. Is it a secular growth or is it only Europe? Was that the question?
Yes. So
it is pretty much secular growth. So we don't see any particular geography not participating in that.
No, in terms of the rebid opportunities, is this largely led by rebids or newer contracts as well?
A large part of it is rebids and new deals. That's where it's coming from. See, the infrastructure business is a very interesting business. What happens is that if you don't keep winning infrastructure bids, your growth in infrastructure will slow down at a point of time.
Impact of hyper-automation. Can you give some idea? I mean, you said having a significant impact. Can you explain that?
So here is what we are doing. We've built our own tools where fundamentally what we do is we pick signals from different layers of the infrastructure. The application layer, the infrastructure layer, the database layer, and we do modeling of that on the fly. And based upon that, what we can do is we can predict issues that can come up in the future. So that's where the big benefit is coming in. We've also got a tool set of ours which actually helps people automate processes rather than kind of have people doing it. So it's a combination of all this put together that's really kind of helping us. In fact, if you're interested in reading more about it, there's a very interesting survey which has been done by Satish Gartner, right? Gartner. We can give you a copy of that. It's a very interesting kind of a study that's been done by Gartner on this. It's called Service Next. I can give it to you.
Yeah, can you, about Europe, can you talk about what proportion of your Europe revenues come from Britain and how continental Europe is doing? And also in that context, because you have a data center in continental Europe, at least one, can you talk about that opportunity as well?
I'm sorry, for which one was that?
Okay, so the first part is how much of the European revenues is coming from continental Europe? Is it growing disproportionately higher than, say, maybe Britain? I mean, which would be great. And also, since you have at least one data center that I know about in Europe, is that a very exciting opportunity? What's happening there? Can you talk about that?
I'd like to kind of introduce Ulrich if I can. Ulrich runs continental Europe for us, and he can give you a sense of what's going on there. Ulrich used to be on the board of T-Systems. So he was a member of the board of T-Systems, and he joined us about 3 months ago. So Ulrich can talk about it. And Satish Doreswamy, whom you probably haven't met, is the head of delivery for us. So he's the other person who you can talk to in terms of Service Next and everything else. But Ulrich, you want to kind of talk a little bit about.
So if we talk about continental Europe at the moment, revenue growth was similar to the other countries in Europe, but looking at the pipeline in Europe, it's dramatic improving compared to the last quarters, I would say. So we're really getting a nice pipeline, and we are expecting much more to come. And if you compare continental Europe to UK in the past, the market is much more mature compared to the last quarter. So the whole economy is much more mature for the offshore business. And come back to the question regarding the data center. Yes, we have one, which is for us a fantastic opportunity to require new customers, to show really that we are on the ground with our data center, not doing everything remotely. So it's a good opportunity and a good door opener for the European market.
Ulrich, thanks for that. If I could ask you again, sir, can you say what proportion of European revenues comes from Britain and what comes from continental Europe?
So we don't break those numbers up separately. I know it's disappointing, right? But
Can you at least say at what rate continental Europe is growing?
Again, we don't break those numbers up. We don't break those numbers up separately. But all I can tell you is that when Ulrich went there, the fundamental idea for us is to run continental Europe from the ground. Mm-hmm. We don't believe you can run continental Europe from India. So Ulrich's job is that he runs both sales, delivery, and it's a completely integrated unit that runs for the whole of continental Europe. We wouldn't be making those kind of investments in that geography if we did not see growth.
To switch tack on financial services, you said in October that you had won a couple of important deals. Do you have an update on how that's going? I mean, have you won any more significant contracts, any marquee customers that you can name?
So we don't obviously name customers, and if we did, you'd see it in our data sheet. But put it this way, our win rate in financial services continues to be healthy till the end of last quarter. We don't see too much of a change in terms of win rates going forward. We see the same momentum continuing. A large part of our revenue would come from the new accounts that we are getting in, especially in banking. There is one area that we have work to do, like I mentioned last time, which was insurance, and that continues to be work in progress.
TK, when do you expect to see the 4 to 4.5% secular growth that you mentioned in the first part of it?
I'm looking at my crystal ball. Hang on for a second. I'll tell you when.
All right, the Wipro management over there. Q3 numbers from Wipro in line with estimates, and as far as guidance goes for the Q4, excluding acquisition, that is also in line with estimates. Essentially, net, a no surprise quarter, but there are two big positives in the results. Dollar revenue growth at 2.9% almost compares with the 3% that TCS delivered, so in line with peers, and also margin expansion continues for Wipro. So that's, of course, the management speaking, Wipro's Q3 numbers.